The vast emptiness between galaxies held secrets that most civilizations could never imagine. In this cold, dark space where no stars shine, ancient beings gathered for a meeting that would change the fate of countless worlds. These were the Ethereal Council, creatures so old that they had watched entire star systems born and die. Their bodies glowed with soft light, like living crystals that pulsed with each thought, for millions of years. These beings had kept peace in the galaxy. It was not an easy job. 3 great powers ruled the stars, and they could not have been more different from each other. The Drachnary Empire loved war above all else. Their soldiers were born fighting, raised fighting, and died fighting. Believed that only through battle could a being prove their worth. Their ships were built like weapons, dark and sharp, cutting through space like knives. The Nexus Collective was the opposite. They had given up their natural bodies long ago, replacing flesh with metal and circuits. They thought with computer minds and spoke in mathematical formulas. Every decision was based on logic and efficiency. They built their worlds like giant machines, perfect and cold. Emotion was something they had left behind centuries ago. Then there were the Solarians, who lived entirely in their minds. They could speak without words, sharing thoughts and feelings across vast distances. Their cities floated in space, held together not by metal or stone, but by the power of their combined will. They valued harmony and understanding above all. But they were also proud and believed their way was the only true path. These 3 powers had maintained an uneasy peace for generations. But now that peace was cracking. In the far reaches of space, new deposits of quantum crystals had been discovered. These crystals were more valuable than any treasure, for they could power ships, weapons, and entire worlds for thousands of years. Each empire wanted them, and none were willing to share. The Drachnary sent their war fleets claiming the crystals by right of strength. The Nexus deployed their automated mining stations, arguing that efficient extraction served the greater good. The Solarians surrounded the crystal fields with their mine barriers, insisting that such power required wisdom to control. Small battles had already begun. Everyone knew that larger ones would follow. Councillor Voltaire watched these events with growing concern. Unlike the other council members who preferred to observe and wait, Velthar believed in taking action. This ancient being had seen wars before, had watched civilizations burn themselves to ash over resources and pride. The coming conflict would be different, though. All 3 empires had grown too powerful, their weapons too destructive. A war between them would not just destroy star systems, it would tear apart the very fabric of space itself. The council meeting took place in their traditional manner, with each member's thoughts flowing freely between them. Most argued for careful monitoring, perhaps some gentle influence, to prevent the worst outcomes. But Velthar had a different idea, one so bold that it shocked even these ancient minds. "We have always worked to keep the powers separate," Velthar's thoughts rippled through the gathering. "We've maintained balance by ensuring none grew too strong, none understood the others too well. But what if we created something new? What if we made beings who could understand all 3 ways of thinking?" The other council members recoiled at the suggestion. Create a new species, interfere so directly in the natural order. It went against everything they had done for millions of years. They were observers, guides, not creators of life itself. But Velthar pressed on. "Look at them," the ancient being urged, sending images of the brewing conflict into their shared consciousness. The Drachnary see only strength, the Nexus only logic, the Solarians only harmony. None can truly understand the others. But what if there were beings who carried pieces of all 3? Beings who could think like Drachnary when courage was needed, like Nexus when problems required solving, like Solarians when wisdom was called for. The debate raged for what humans would call days, though time had little meaning in the void between. Galaxies. Some council members argued that such interference was too dangerous, too unpredictable. Others worried about the ethics of creating life for their own purposes. But as reports of escalating conflicts reached them, more began to see Velthar's point. Finally, the decision was made. They would find a suitable world, far from the major trade routes and power centers. There, they would plant the seeds of their great experiment. They would take the genetic patterns that made the Drachneri fierce, the Nexus brilliant, and the Solarians empathetic, and weave them into a new form of life. The world they chose was perfect for their needs. It orbited a stable yellow star in a quiet corner of the galaxy that the great powers had ignored. The planet already showed signs of developing life, primitive creatures beginning to emerge from its oceans. It would be the ideal laboratory for their experiment. As the council dispersed to begin their work, none of them realized what they had truly set in motion. They thought they were creating a solution to prevent war, a species that could serve as mediators and peacekeepers. Had no idea they were about to create something far more dangerous and wonderful than any of them could imagine. The blue world waited, unaware that its destiny had just been decided by beings older than its sun. The work began slowly, as all great changes do. The ethereal council descended upon the blue world they had chosen, their forms invisible to the primitive life crawling across its surface. In the deepest caves and highest mountains, they planted their genetic gifts like seeds in fertile soil. Each strand of DNA they touched carried a piece of their grand plan. From the fierce Drachneri, they took the fire that burned in warrior hearts. Not just the love of battle, but the refusal to give up when facing impossible odds. The drive to protect what mattered most, even at the cost of one's own life. This strength they wove into the growing minds of early humans, hoping it would make them brave enough to face any challenge. From the brilliant Nexus Collective, they borrowed the spark of innovation, the ability to look at broken things and see how to fix them, the curiosity that asked, what if, and why not instead of accepting things as they were, the clever hands that could build tools from nothing and solve problems that seemed impossible. This gift they placed in human minds like a flame that would never go out. From the wise Solarians, they took the rarest gift of all, the ability to truly understand others. Not just their words, but their feelings, their hopes, their fears. The power to see beauty in art and music, to feel joy in another's happiness and pain in their suffering. This empathy they wrapped around human hearts like a protective shield. The council expected their creation to develop in neat, predictable stages. They had models and calculations showing exactly how these traits would blend together. Humans would be strong like Drachneri when needed, smart like Nexus when problems arose, and wise like Solarians when making important decisions. They would grow slowly, carefully, always balanced and reasonable, but humans refused to follow the plan. The first surprise came early. While other species on their world formed simple groups, humans built complex societies almost overnight. Created languages so rich and varied that even the council struggled to follow them all. They developed rituals and beliefs that had no practical purpose except to bring meaning to their lives. They made art for the simple joy of creating beauty. Yet at the same time, they fought wars that shocked even the warlike Drachneri. Where other species fought for food or territory, humans fought for ideas. They would die for concepts that existed only in their minds: honor, freedom, justice, revenge. They created weapons of terrible power, then immediately began working on even more terrible ones. The council watched in amazement as humans built magnificent cities, centers of learning and culture that rivaled anything in the galaxy. Towering spires reached toward the sky, filled with libraries, theaters, and schools. Art and music flowed through the streets like water. Then, sometimes for reasons that made no sense, these same humans would destroy everything they had built and start over again. One moment, they would be composing beautiful poetry about love and friendship. The next, they would be designing better ways to kill their enemies. They would spend decades perfecting the art of healing, then turn that same knowledge toward creating poisons. They would build monuments to peace while preparing for war. The strangest part was how they did all of this at the same time. Unlike the single-minded focus of the three great empires, humans seemed to contain multitudes. A single human could be gentle with children and ruthless with enemies. They could create breathtaking beauty and terrible destruction with equal skill. They could show incredible wisdom in one moment and stunning foolishness in the next. As centuries passed, the Council's unease grew. Their careful genetic programming was supposed to create balance, but instead it had created chaos. Humans were unpredictable in ways that made even the most complex computer models useless. They would make decisions based on emotions that defied all logic. They would sacrifice everything for principles that seemed to change from day to day. When humans finally began reaching for the stars with their primitive rockets, the Council realized they had made a terrible mistake. These beings were not the careful, balanced mediators they had planned to create. They were something entirely new, something that had never existed in the galaxy before. The Drachnary gene gave them courage, but it also gave them recklessness. It would attempt things that were clearly impossible and somehow succeed. The Nexus gene gave them intelligence, but it also gave them curiosity that bordered on madness. They would take apart anything they could find just to see how it worked. The Solarian gene gave them empathy, but it also gave them passion that could drive them to extremes of love and hate. Worst of all, from the Council's perspective, humans were learning to blend these traits in ways that had never been intended. They were becoming something that was neither Drachnary, nor Nexus, nor Solarian, but something entirely their own. They were evolving beyond their programming, growing into a force that could not be predicted or controlled. The Council had wanted to create a species that could understand the three great powers of the galaxy. Instead, they had created a species that might one day challenge all of them. As they watched human civilization spread across their world, the ancient beings began to wonder if their solution to prevent one. War might have created the seeds of an even greater conflict. The experiment was out of control, and there was no way to stop it. The day humans first left their blue world marked the beginning of everything the Ethereal Council had feared. For thousands of years, they had watched their experiment grow from primitive tribes to advanced civilizations. They had seen humans build cities, discover science, and slowly reach toward the stars with clumsy metal rockets, the Council thought. They still had time to figure out what to do with their unpredictable creation, but humans moved faster than anyone expected. One day they were launching simple satellites, and the next they had colonies on nearby planets. Their technology grew, not in the slow, careful steps that most species took, but in wild leaps that defied all logic. They seemed to learn from every mistake instantly, turning failures into breakthroughs overnight. The first to notice were the Drachnary scouts patrolling the outer edges of their territory. These fierce warriors had seen many species take their first steps into space, and most followed the same pattern. They would send out careful, cautious probes, explore their own solar system for decades, then slowly venture to nearby stars. It was a process that usually took thousands of years. Humans did it all in less than 2. Centuries Commander Zethkar of the Drachnary Third Fleet was the first to file an official report about the strange new species. "They fight like us," he wrote, "but they think like machines. They feel like Solarians, but they build like the Nexus. I do not understand what they are." The Nexus Collective noticed them next. Their monitoring stations detected the unusual energy signatures coming from human ships. These newcomers were using technologies that should have taken millennia to develop, yet they were doing it with materials and methods that seemed almost primitive. It was like watching someone build a computer using stone tools. Analyst Node 7749 processed the data with growing confusion. Their technological development pattern matches no known species progression. They appear to be inventing solutions rather than discovering them. This should not be possible. The Solarians were the last to take notice, but when they did, they were the most disturbed. Their telepathic senses could feel the emotional chaos radiating from human space like a storm. These beings felt everything so intensely that it was almost painful to observe. Love, hate, joy, anger, curiosity, fear all mixed together in combinations that made no sense. High Contemplator Allen shared her concerns with the Unity Council. "They burn with feelings we can barely comprehend. Their minds are like stars. Beautiful and terrifying, impossible to look at directly. They are not like us, not like anyone." When the three great powers finally agreed to make contact, they expected the usual responses. Most new species either ran in terror when faced with superior technology, or they immediately submitted and begged to join galactic civilization. A few tried to fight and were quickly defeated. None had ever done what humans did. The first meeting took place above Earth's moon. Representatives from all three powers arrived in their most impressive ships, expecting to overwhelm these newcomers with displays of advanced technology. Instead, they found humans waiting for them with recording equipment, scientific instruments, and endless questions. Dr. Kim Minho led the human delegation. He was a small, quiet man who looked nothing like the fierce warriors the Draknari expected, or the emotionless logicians the Nexus anticipated. But when he spoke, his words carried a weight that surprised everyone. "Welcome to our system," he said simply. "We have been waiting for you. We have so much to learn from each other." What happened next shocked the galaxy. Instead of begging for technology or cowering before superior firepower, humans began studying their visitors. They asked questions about ship design, energy systems, and faster-than-light travel. They wanted to know about alien cultures, histories, and philosophies. They were like children in a toy store, fascinated by everything they saw. Engineer Parkalina was even more direct. She openly admitted that humans would try to copy everything they learned. "We see no shame in learning from others," she explained to the confused alien delegates. "Your technologies will help us build better ships, explore further, and understand more about the universe. Thank you for showing them to us." The aliens had never encountered such honesty. Most species tried to hide their intentions to appear weak or strong, depending on what seemed most advantageous. But humans seemed to have no filter, no sense of proper diplomatic caution. They said exactly what they were thinking, which made negotiations almost impossible because no one knew how to respond to such directness. Within months, human scientists had reverse-engineered basic alien technologies. Within years, they had improved upon them. The Draknari were amazed at how quickly humans learned to build better weapons. The Nexus were stunned by human innovations in computing and engineering. The Solarians were fascinated by human art and music that incorporated alien influences. But the real shock came when human scientists began asking uncomfortable questions. Dr. Kim Minho's research team had been studying the genetic samples provided during cultural exchanges. What they found made no sense. "How is it possible, Doctor?" Kim asked during a diplomatic meeting. "That three species from completely different parts of the galaxy shared genetic markers with life forms from Earth. The mathematical probability of this happening naturally is essentially zero." Engineer Parkalina had similar questions about technology. "Your three civilizations developed in isolation, yet you all use similar principles in your most advanced systems. It's as if someone taught you all from the same source material." The alien delegates had no answers because they had never thought to ask these questions. For thousands of years, they had simply accepted their differences as natural. Now, humans were pointing out patterns that suggested something else entirely, in the hidden spaces between galaxies. The Ethereal Council watched their creation ask the questions they had hoped would never be asked. Their grand experiment was not just out of control. It was threatening to expose the truth about everything. The Great Hall had never seen anything like this before. For the first time in galactic history, representatives from all three major powers sat in the same room without weapons drawn or shields raised. The Draknari warriors stood at attention, their battle armor gleaming under the lights. The Nexus delegates connected through their neural networks, sharing data at impossible speeds. The Solarian mystics floated in their meditation spheres, their minds reaching out to sense the emotions of everyone present, but all eyes were on the human who walked calmly to the center of the room. Admiral Lee. Hannah was not an imposing figure by galactic standards. She was smaller than the shortest Draknari warrior, less augmented than the most basic Nexus drone, and possessed none of the glowing psychic aura that surrounded even junior Solarian diplomats. Yet when she entered the chamber, the very air seemed to change, or something about her presence that commanded attention without demanding it. In her hands, she carried a simple data tablet. On that tablet was information that would shake the foundations of everything the galaxy believed about itself. The discovery had taken human scientists 5 years to piece together. It started with Dr. Kim Minho's genetic research and engineer, Park Elena's technological analysis, but it had grown into something much larger. Teams of human researchers had worked day and night, following clues that led them deeper and deeper into galactic history. The breakthrough came when human archaeologists found ruins on a dead world in the neutral zone. Structures were ancient, beyond measure, built by beings that had vanished millions of years ago. But hidden in those ruins were records, written in a language so old that even the most advanced translation systems struggled to decode it. The records spoke of watchers, of ancient beings who guided the development of younger species. They mentioned genetic manipulation, careful breeding programs, and the deliberate separation of galactic powers to maintain balance. Most shocking of all, they contained detailed maps showing the location of a small blue world that had been chosen for a special experiment. As more evidence accumulated, the picture became clear. Humanity had not evolved naturally. They were the product of deliberate engineering, created by beings so old and powerful that they had become legends. The three great galactic civilizations were not natural rivals. They had been kept apart on purpose, prevented from learning about each other to maintain an artificial balance of power. When Admiral Lee finally spoke, her voice was calm and steady. "We know who we are," she said, looking directly at the space above the assembly where invisible beings watched. "We know who created us, and we know why." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Drachnary warriors roared in outrage at the thought of being manipulated. Nexus systems overloaded as they processed the implications of their artificial development. Solarian mystics recoiled in horror at the emotional chaos radiating from the crowd. But Admiral Lee continued speaking, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade through silk. "The Ethereal Council thought they were preventing a war by creating us. They believed that by combining the strengths of all three civilizations, they could produce mediators who would keep the peace. They were right about one thing: we are the children of all three peoples. We carry Drachnary courage, Nexus innovation, and Solarian wisdom in our very bones." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But they were wrong about everything else. We are not their tools to be used. We are not their experiment to be controlled. We're not their solution to problems they created by keeping you all apart for millions of years." The tablet in her hands projected a holographic display showing the ancient ruins, the genetic evidence, and the technological patterns that proved beyond doubt that all four species had been manipulated by the same hidden hand. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and terrifying. "For countless ages," Admiral Lee continued, "the Ethereal Council has played games with your lives. They have kept the Drachnary focused on war, the Nexus obsessed with logic, and the Solarians trapped in their own thoughts. They have prevented you from learning about each other, from sharing your knowledge, from becoming more than what they wanted you to be. The ancient beings watching from their hidden dimension felt the weight of exposure like a physical blow. For the first time in millions of years, their carefully maintained secrecy had been shattered. Their grand design lay exposed before the very species they had sought to control. But Admiral Lee was not finished. We could demand justice for what was done to us. We could seek revenge for the manipulation of our evolution. We could try to punish those who treated us like pieces on a game board, but that would make us no better than the worst aspects of our creators." She turned slowly, addressing each delegation in turn. "Instead, we offer you something better. We offer you the truth. We offer you freedom from the artificial barriers that have kept you separated. We offer you the chance to become more than any of you ever imagined possible." The proposal she presented was simple in concept, but revolutionary in scope. The artificial divisions that had defined galactic civilization would end. The three great powers would join together in a true confederation, sharing knowledge and resources freely. Earth would serve not as ruler or subject, but as a neutral ground where different ways of thinking could meet and learn from each other. "We are proof," Admiral Lee concluded, "that strength, intelligence, and wisdom are not opposites to be kept apart. They are gifts that become greater when they work together. We invite you to join us in building something new, a galaxy where diversity creates unity, not division." The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. The old order was ending, and something entirely new was about to begin. The changes began slowly, like sunrise after the longest night. In the months following Admiral Lee Hanna's revelation, the galaxy held its breath. Everyone expected explosions of anger, demands for revenge, or at least the massive war that had been predicted for so long. Instead, something remarkable happened. The three great powers began to talk to each other. It started with small things. A Draknari engineer asked a Nexus technician about improving ship engines. A Solarian artist shared emotional techniques. With a human musician, a human doctor showed Draknari healers how to combine their warrior determination with gentle care for the wounded. These tiny exchanges grew into something much larger. The first official meeting of what would become the Galactic Confederation took place on Earth. In a simple building overlooking the blue oceans that had once been humanity's entire world. The choice was symbolic. This was where the great experiment had begun. And now, it would be where something new would start. Ambassador Cho Su-ben welcomed the delegates with quiet dignity. She was young for such an important role. But she had something that impressed even the most experienced diplomats. She could make anyone feel understood. When Draknari spoke of honor, she nodded with genuine respect. When Nexus discussed efficiency, she appreciated their logic. When Solarians shared their spiritual insights, she listened with her whole heart. The first major breakthrough came when diplomat Yang Tai-ho suggested they work together on a practical problem. Pirates had been attacking shipping lanes in the neutral zone, and none of the powers had been able to stop them alone. Why not combine our strengths? He asked simply. Draknari courage, Nexus technology, and Solarian wisdom working together. The joint operation was a complete success. Draknari warriors provided the bravery needed to face dangerous criminals. Nexus computers calculated the best strategies and provided advanced equipment. Solarian mystics used their telepathic abilities to predict pirate movements and coordinate the response. Together they accomplished in weeks what none could have done alone in years. But the real changes went much deeper than military cooperation. As the species began to share their knowledge and cultures, they discovered things about themselves they had never known. The Draknari had always believed that strength came only through conflict. But when they saw human soldiers protecting refugee camps and Nexus engineers building hospitals, they realized their warrior spirit could be used to defend and heal. It's not just destroy. Captain Vexthel of the Draknari Honor Guard was among the first to embrace this new understanding. We thought strength meant defeating enemies, he told a gathering of young warriors. But true strength means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The humans have shown us that the greatest victory is not in conquest, but in service. Nexus Collective faced their own revelations. For centuries, they had pursued pure logic and efficiency, believing that emotions were weaknesses to be eliminated. But watching humans combine analytical thinking with passion and creativity, they began to see what they had lost. Their technology was perfect, but it was also sterile. They could build anything, but they had forgotten why building mattered. Node-Prime 1, the closest thing the Nexus had to a leader, made a statement that shocked their entire civilization. We have achieved perfect efficiency in creating meaningless things. The humans have shown us that imperfect solutions born of love and hope are more valuable than perfect answers that serve no one. The Solarians experienced perhaps the greatest transformation of all. Their telepathic abilities had always been their greatest strength, but also their greatest isolation. They could read minds and share thoughts, but they had become trapped in their own spiritual superiority. Humans showed them that true wisdom came not from understanding everything, but from admitting when you were wrong and learning from others. Elder Zariman, one of the most powerful Solarian mystics, discovered that her telepathic abilities, actually, grew stronger when she worked with humans in Draknari. Their different ways of thinking didn't interfere with her mental powers, they enhanced them. I spent centuries believing that other minds were noise, she admitted, but they are music. Together we create harmonies that none of us could achieve alone. The most surprising development was what happened to the Ethereal Council themselves. For millions of years they had ruled from the shadows, convinced that they alone possessed the wisdom to guide galactic civilization. But watching their creation build something better than anything they had ever imagined, they finally understood their mistake. Counselor Velther, who had originally proposed the human experiment, was the first to emerge from hiding. The ancient being appeared before the Confederation Council, its crystalline form dimmed with what humans recognized as humility. "We thought we were gods," Velthar admitted. "We believed that our age gave us the right to control the destiny of younger species, but you have shown us that wisdom is not about having all the answers. It is about knowing when to step aside and let others find their own path." The Ethereal Council did not disappear or retreat to their dimensional hiding places. Instead, they took on new roles as advisors and historians, sharing their vast knowledge while allowing others to make their own decisions. They became teachers rather than rulers, guides rather than controllers. Years passed, and the galaxy transformed beyond recognition. Trade routes that had been battlegrounds became highways of cultural exchange. Worlds that had been isolated for millennia opened their doors to visitors from across the stars. Children grew up learning multiple languages and ways of thinking, seeing diversity as strength rather than threat. The war that everyone had feared never came. Instead, something much more powerful emerged, a civilization that combined the best of all its members. While honoring their differences, the Drachneri brought courage and honor. The Nexus contributed innovation and precision. The Solarians shared wisdom and insight. And humans provided the bridge that connected them all. In the end, the greatest experiment in galactic history had succeeded beyond its creator's wildest dreams, not because it had prevented a war, but because it had shown that former enemies could become family. The children of an ancient experiment had become the teachers of their makers, proving that even the most powerful beings in the universe could learn something new. The end.